September 26th has seen moments that shaped our world, voyages that pushed human limits, wars that destroyed ancient wonders, disasters that shook nations, and even a single man preventing nuclear war. What happened on this day that still echoes through history? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll see how one decision saved humanity itself. On September 26, 1580, history was made on the shores of Plymouth, England. After nearly 3 years at sea, Sir Francis Drake returned aboard his ship, the Golden Hind, completing one of the greatest maritime feats in human history, sailing all the way around the globe. But this journey was far from peaceful exploration. Drake was not only a navigator, he was also a privateer, essentially a state-sanctioned pirate. Backed by Queen Elizabeth I, his mission was to strike at Spain, England's greatest rival. Along the way, he raided Spanish ports, captured treasure-laden galleons, and claimed riches that would fuel England's rise as a world power. The voyage itself was grueling. Drake and his crew faced violent storms that smashed their ships, diseases that wiped out many sailors, and constant threats from enemy forces. Out of the 5 ships that began the expedition, only the Golden Hind survived the full journey. When Drake finally dropped anchor in Plymouth, the world had changed. He became the first Englishman and only the second person in history to circumnavigate the Earth. His daring journey proved England's naval potential and Challenger, Spain's dominance at sea. For the English, he was celebrated as a hero. For the Spanish, he was branded a ruthless pirate. This single voyage marked the dawn of a new era, one where oceans were no longer barriers, but highways to global power, wealth, and conflict. On September 26, 1687, one of the world's most iconic monuments suffered its greatest tragedy. The Parthenon in Athens, an ancient temple dedicated to the goddess Athena, was rocked by a massive explosion. At the time, Athens was caught in the middle of the Mauryan War, a brutal conflict between the Ottoman Empire and the Venetian Republic. The Ottomans, who controlled the city, had converted the Parthenon into a gunpowder magazine, storing thousands of pounds of explosives inside its ancient marble walls. It was a dangerous choice, and a fatal one. When Venetian forces fired a mortar shell toward the Acropolis, disaster struck. The projectile pierced the roof of the Parthenon and ignited the stored gunpowder. The resulting blast tore through the temple, blowing apart columns, collapsing the roof, and sending centuries of priceless sculpture crashing to the ground. Witnesses described the explosion as a blinding flash followed by thunder that shook the entire city. Overnight, a masterpiece of classical architecture that had stood for over 2,000 years was left in ruins. Statues and friezes that had once symbolized the glory of ancient Greece were reduced to rubble. The destruction of the Parthenon was more than just the loss of stone and marble, it was a cultural catastrophe. It severed a living link to the ancient world, reminding us that war does not just claim lives, it also erases history. To this day, the scars of that explosion remain visible, a haunting reminder of how fragile even the greatest achievements of civilization can be. On September 26, 1777, the city of Philadelphia, then the largest city in America and the heart of the Revolution, fell into British hands. Led by General William Howe, nearly 15,000 British troops marched into the city, forcing the Continental Congress to abandon Philadelphia just days earlier. For the colonists, this was more than just the loss of a city, it was the loss of their symbolic capital, the place where the Declaration of Independence had been signed only a year before. Philadelphia's streets quickly changed. Loyalists welcomed the British Army, while patriots fled or went into hiding. Soldiers occupied homes, taverns, and public buildings. Redcoats patrolled the very streets where revolution had first taken root. But the occupation was not the victory the British had hoped for. While Howe and his officers celebrated in Philadelphia, George Washington and the Continental Army regrouped nearby. Just months later, Washington would lead his troops into the bitter winter at Valley Forge, turning defeat into resilience. For the Patriots, the fall of Philadelphia was a painful setback, but it was not the end. Instead, it hardened their resolve. The revolution would not die with the capture of a city. It was an idea, and ideas cannot be conquered by armies. September 26, 1777, stands as a reminder that freedom often endures its darkest nights before reaching the dawn. On September 26, 1907, a small island nation in the South Pacific stepped onto the global stage with new authority. New Zealand, long a colony of the British Empire, officially became a dominion. This change may sound like a simple word, but it was far more than that. Dominion status meant New Zealand was no longer just a colony to be ruled, it was now self-governing, with the power to manage its own affairs while still recognizing the British monarch as head of state. It was independence in all but name. The people of New Zealand took immense pride in this moment. Their young democracy, which had already broken barriers by granting women the right to vote in 1893, was now claiming a new political identity. The move signaled that nations far from Europe could govern themselves, paving the way for a stronger, more independent voice in world affairs. Over the years, this dominion status would evolve into full sovereignty. But September 26, 1907, was the turning point. It marked the moment New Zealand began to stand as its own nation, confident, distinct, and determined to shape its own destiny. September 26, 1917, amid the mud, smoke, and devastation of World War I. Allied troops launched a massive assault near Ypres, Belgium. This was the Battle of Polygon Wood, one of the brutal engagements of the larger Third Battle of Ypres, also known as Parthenon. At dawn, waves of Australian and British soldiers pushed forward behind a creeping artillery barrage, an enormous wall of exploding shells that advanced step by step ahead of the infantry. The goal was to dislodge deeply entrenched German forces holding the high ground. The battlefield itself was a nightmare. Polygon Wood, once a dense forest, had been reduced to shattered tree stumps and craters filled with water and mud. Machine gun fire tore across the landscape. Gas shells added a new terror. Yet, despite these horrors, the Allies advanced steadily. By the end of the battle, they had captured the ridge and inflicted heavy casualties on the German army. It was hailed as a success, but the price was staggering. Thousands of soldiers lay dead or wounded, and the ground gained was measured in yards, not miles. Polygon Wood reminds us of the grinding, relentless nature of trench warfare, where victory was often Pyrrhic, and every inch of land came at the cost of unimaginable human suffering. September 26, 1918, just weeks before the end of World War I, the Allies launched one of the largest offensives in American military history, the Meuse-Argonne Offensive. At dawn, over 1.2 million American soldiers, alongside French units, surged forward against heavily fortified German defenses stretching across northeastern France. The objective was simple but daunting: break through the Hindenburg Line, cut off German supply routes, and push the enemy back toward defeat. The battlefield was a nightmare of thick forests, barbed wire, machine gun nests, and artillery fire. The terrain itself slowed the advanced dense woods, and rolling hills made coordination nearly impossible. Soldiers fought yard by yard, often under withering fire and poison gas. It was here that countless acts of heroism took place. Units like the famous Lost Battalion fought to the last man, while young leaders such as Captain Harry Truman and Colonel George Patton cut their teeth in battle. Even Sergeant Alvin York, in a single day, captured more than 100 German soldiers, earning the Medal of Honor. The fighting dragged on for 6 relentless weeks. By the time the offensive ended on November 11th with the signing of the armistice, more than 26,000 American soldiers had been killed and over 95,000 wounded. Though costly, the Meuse-Argonne Offensive proved decisive. It broke the German will to fight and helped bring World War I to its bloody conclusion. It remains the largest and deadliest battle ever fought by the United States Army. Now, let's travel to New York City in 1957, where Broadway was alive with excitement and anticipation. On September 26th, West Side Story premiered, introducing audiences to a powerful, modern retelling of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Picture the bustling streets of Manhattan, recreated on stage with vibrant sets and sweeping choreography. The music, composed by Leonard Bernstein with lyrics by Stephen Sondheim, blended classical motifs with jazz and Latin rhythms, creating a sound that had never been heard in musical theater before. The story wasn't just about love, it confronted real issues, gang rivalries, racial tension, and the challenges faced by immigrant communities in urban America. Each song, every dance sequence, carried emotion and social commentary, captivating audiences night after night. From the soaring notes of Maria to the heartbreaking tension in the climactic street fight, West Side Story revolutionized storytelling on stage. Its innovative fusion of music, dance, and narrative inspired countless productions afterward, solidifying its place as one of the most iconic and influential musicals in theater history. Just 2 years after the excitement of Broadway, Japan faced one of its darkest natural disasters. On September 26, 1959, Typhoon Vera, known locally as Isuan Typhoon, struck the Ise Bay region with unimaginable force. Imagine winds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour, waves crashing over seawalls, and torrential rains flooding towns in an instant. Entire communities were swept away. Houses, roads, and infrastructure vanished beneath the water. Nearly 5,000 lives were tragically lost, and hundreds of thousands of people were left without shelter, facing cold, hunger, and uncertainty. The devastation wasn't just physical, it shook the nation's sense of security. Rescue operations, relief efforts, and reconstruction became a monumental challenge. But they also showcased the resilience and solidarity of the Japanese people. Typhoon Vera remains one of the deadliest storms in Japanese history, a stark reminder of nature's power and the importance of disaster preparedness. Its legacy influenced building codes, early warning systems, and the way Japan approaches emergency response to this day. September 26, 1960, a date that forever transformed political campaigning. On this day, John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon stepped onto the stage for the very first televised presidential debate in American history. Picture it, millions of Americans gathered around their television sets, eyes glued to their screens, witnessing a new era where how a candidate looked and carried themselves mattered as much as the words they spoke. Kennedy, young and telegenic, projected confidence and calm under pressure, while Nixon, recovering from a recent hospitalization, appeared tired and less composed. This debate wasn't just a contest of policies, it was a masterclass in media influence, showing the world that television could shape public perception and even determine the outcome of elections. Kennedy's poise and charisma captured the nation's imagination, helping him secure the presidency and forever changing how politicians engage with the public. It was a moment when technology met politics, altering the landscape of democracy and demonstrating that communication in the modern age is about more than speech. It's about presence, image, and connection with the audience. September 26, 1983, a date that could have rewritten the history of humanity. Deep within a Soviet military bunker, alarms blared. Their early warning system had detected incoming U.S. nuclear missiles. By protocol, retaliation was mandatory. The fate of millions rested on a single decision. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, a mid-level officer responsible for reporting such threats, faced an unimaginable choice. The system screamed attack, but something didn't sit right. Petrov trusted his instincts over the cold calculations of a machine. He refused to escalate, refusing to launch a counterstrike that could have triggered full-scale nuclear war. His calm judgment in the face of panic likely saved the world from total annihilation. Think about that, the lives of millions, the course of nations, the very survival of humanity, hanging on the discernment of one man. This wasn't a battlefield with swords or tanks, it was a battlefield of intellect, courage, and conscience. Petrov's story reminds us that sometimes the gravest moments in history are won not with weapons, but with wisdom and moral courage. Now, leap forward to September 26, 2008, a day that redefined the very idea of human flight. Swiss pilot and inventor Yves Rossi strapped on his jet-powered wing, a marvel of engineering that turned the human body into a personal aircraft. From the cliffs of Dover, Rossi launched himself into the skies and soared across the English Channel, becoming the first person to cross this treacherous stretch of water with nothing but a wing and a dream. Imagine the wind roaring past, the waves far below, and the weight of history on his shoulders, every second a test of courage, skill, and precision. This wasn't just a stunt, it was the culmination of years of experimentation, pushing the boundaries of human potential. Rossi's flight inspired a generation to imagine new possibilities in aviation, adventure, and innovation. It proved that with vision and daring, humans can literally take flight in ways previously thought impossible. And there you have it, September 26th, a day of daring explorers, monumental battles, groundbreaking inventions, cultural milestones, and near catastrophes averted. From Sir Francis Drake's circumnavigating the globe to Parthenon's destruction, New Zealand's independence, Broadway premieres, devastating storms, televised debates, heroic decisions that prevented nuclear war. And Eve Rossi's flight across the English Channel, this single date reminds us how human courage, creativity, and resilience shape history. Which of these moments surprised or inspired you the most? Drop a comment below. And if you enjoyed this journey, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss another deep dive into the days that changed our world.